The dust may only just have settled on the spring classics, but fear not. Grand Tour season is now just around the corner. Welcome to our Big GCN Giro d'Italia preview show.
Coming up, a detailed look at all 21 stages that make up the 107th edition of the race, plus the sprinters, time trialists and GC riders taking part.
First up though, time for our predictions. I'm going to Tadej Pogačar.
You can't do that.
I'm only joking, of course. Let's start instead by taking a look back at what happened this time last year.
Presumably that is your prediction though.
It is.
And a demolition job on day one. And Jonathan Milan, he hit the front and they couldn't budge him. This sprint is eternal, this sprint's never ending. A Grand Tour stage win is up for grabs. Oh, the huge crash as they come across the line. It's a heart attack sprint here in Napoli. A life-changing moment at the Giro d'Italia. An Irish cycling star is born. And yet again from the breakaway, it's EF Education Easy Post. Where did that come from? And finally it's his. And Movistar have their day. Oh, I don't know. And today is the day. And look at this for Joao Almeida. Oh, Dainese, Matthews, Milan. There it is. Uijtdebroeks wins a stage. This is the time. A reminder that 26 seconds, the difference between Thomas and Roglic in the general classification. Oh, no, 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 no. Start the clock and build the tension. Geraint Thomas loses the Giro d'Italia. More Cavendish, enjoy it, savour it, remember it. The world's best, the greatest of all time, sprints to victory again.
Now I am buzzing for the start.
Yeah, well the thing is, any 3-week race can look good in a 1-minute montage like we've just seen, but last year's Giro was actually a little disappointing, I would say, until the very end. I'm hoping for a better edition this year.
You are a hard man to please,
I am.
Dan, I'm going to say. Shall we start with a bit of history before we crack on with the route?
Okay, sir.
I'll keep it brief, right?
Okay.
As mentioned at the start, this is the 107th edition of the race. Like the Tour de France, the race was set up to increase sales of a newspaper, in this case, the Gazzetta dello Sport, with its pink pages. The Gazzetta had already set up and had success with Milan-San Remo and the Giro di Lombardia and wanted to start a tour of Italy before rival Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera. The only problem was they didn't have enough money, so they had to do an early 1900s form of crowdfunding to kickstart the race. Now that was in 1908, and in May 1909, 127 riders set out from Milan for the first ever Giro d'Italia.
That was brilliant, but not that brief. Si.
No, it wasn't actually, was it?
The first edition was only 8 stages, but still covered close to 2,500 Ks. Only 49 riders finished that year, and the GC was won by Luigi Ganna, who'd won 3 stages. Interestingly, for the first few years of the Giro, the GC was actually decided on points rather than accumulated time.
Well, there you go. Time now, fast forward 115 years, and we're going to talk you through the 2024 route. So at 3,401 kilometres, it's 900 kilometres longer than the inaugural edition, but it's also 12 stages longer as well.
Oh, it is, yes. Those stages, the 21 of them, are divided up as follows this year. So we've got 2 individual time trials, 6 sprint stages, 8 hilly days, and 5 days in the high mountains. Although a few of the stages they describe as hilly, they look quite mountainous to me, if I'm honest.
Well, yeah, in total, there will be a little over 44,000 metres of climbing for the riders between the start in Turin and the finish 3 weeks later in Rome, which is significantly less than a normal edition of the Giro, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, the first 3 stages are all going to be in the Piemonte region, which is in the far northwest of the country. The first of those 3, well, it's a punchy 140 kilometre route from Vinale Reale to Turin.
Yeah, there are 3 categorised climbs en route that get progressively harder. The first of those is the Bassano di San Pietro. Then it's on to the Superga, a very deliberate move by the organisers, as it will be exactly 75 years to the day since a plane crash that took the lives of many of the champions of the Grande Torino football team in 1949.
Then from there, they are going to descend back into Torino, or Turin, where they're going to tackle the final climb of the day, the Colle Maddalena. This is actually going to be tackled from the opposite side to what they did in 2021, where Simon Yates took the stage win. The climb itself, 7 kilometres at 8% average gradient.
Wow. Now, when the route was first revealed last autumn, that was the final climb, and it is still the final categorised climb, but they've since added another uncategorised one, which they will be doing twice on their lap and a little bit extra around Turin.
So the first time it comes ahead of the Maddalena climb, and then the next time it's in the final 5 clays, that new climb they put in. Now, when you look at the stats, you sort of wonder why it's not categorised, because it's 1.5 k's long with an average gradient of 9.2% and a max of 14.3.
Yeah, which makes it fairly comparable to the Mur de Huy in Belgium.
Well, it's hard, basically, what we're saying, isn't it? And it's also hard to see any scenario other than Pogačar riding away and into the first pink jersey of the race.
Yeah, particularly because there's only 3 kilometres from the top to the finish, all descending.
Well, here's hoping you'll have at least some competition on day one. Stage 2 marks the earliest summit finish of the race since 1989. That year it was on Mount Etna. This year it's Europa, which is a climb made famous by Marco Pantani in the controversial 99 edition. Basically, he had a mechanical at the bottom of Europa, but once he'd got his chain back on, he rode past every single rider in front of him and eventually took the stage win.
Some ride, isn't it? Now, the last time it was used at the Giro was in 2017 when Tom Dumoulin rode to what was an unexpected victory at the time. He went on to win the race overall, so it kind of wasn't surprising in hindsight, I guess. It's a long climb at just under 12 kilometres with an average gradient of just over 6%, but a long 7 kilometre section where it rarely goes under 8%.
Yeah, we've seen close battles here before, haven't we? But as will be the theme for a lot of this preview, there's one very clear favourite to win stage 2 as well, and that is Tadej Pogačar.
Yeah, so the sprinters at the race will have to wait until stage 3 for their first opportunity. But even then, it's not going to be easy for them, is it? So the stage begins in Novara and finishes 166 k's later in Fossano.
That said, like you said, actually, it's not exactly a flat finish, is it? Apparently, it's a similar run into the finale of the Giro del Piemonte in 2009, where Philippe Gilbert outsprinted a group of puncheurs. On this occasion, though, after the climb, which is 1.5 k's long at 5% average gradient with a couple of hairpin bends, there's still about 3 k's of flat to the finish. So, one for the stronger sprinters, perhaps.
Yeah, easy, that, isn't it?
Easy peasy.
Stage 4 starts in Piemonte in Uijtdebroeks, but heads into Liguria after around 30 kilometres. There is only one climb of any note that day, and as it comes midway through the 190k stage, it probably won't have much of a bearing on the outcome.
That climb that Si's talking about is the Colla di Mologno, used at the 1965 Milano-San Remo. And
That's a fact for you.
Thanks, mate.
You just plucked that out of thin air.
I researched it earlier. I've managed to get it in.
Impressive.
Anyway, it's going to be onto the familiar Ligurian coastline from that race of Milan-San Remo that they'll then head to, tracking it from Savona and to the finish line in Andorra.
Not the Andorra.
Well, it's an Andorra. It's not the country.
No, that'd be weird, wouldn't it?
It'd be a long stage.
It would, wouldn't it? Just before that finish line is the Capo Mele. Again, familiar to those who have watched Milan-San Remo. It's just the first of the Tre Capi that precede the Cipressa and the Poggio. In this stage, the Capo Mele peaks with just under 3 kilometres to go, and so it will be a fast and frantic finish.
It will be, yes. Stage 5, not dissimilar actually, stage 5, in that the main climb comes so far from the finish, it will have little bearing on the outcome of the stage. It's a third category, the Passo del Bracco, a climb that was used on stage 11 of last year's race, which was won by Pascal Ackermann.
On that occasion, they finished in Tortona. This time, they'll be heading to Lucca in Tuscany. So there's a fourth cat climb that peaks with 21 kilometres to go, but it shouldn't trouble the sprinters. So they should be deciding the stage among themselves.
Incidentally, it's been a long time since Lucca played host to a stage finish at the Giro d'Italia, 1985. That year, it was for the final day's individual time trial won by Francesco Moser.
You have been doing some research, haven't you? That is impressive as well.
Usually.
Yeah, the race, have you been asking Killian Kelly?
Yes, now he's fixed the uploader, he's got loads of time on his hands.
Brilliant. Right, the race stays in Tuscany for stage 6, so whilst they're there, they may as well take on some gravel roads.
Well, it'll be rude not to, wouldn't it? So stage 6 is indeed the Stirato stage. 3 sections of Strade Bianche, totalling 11.2 k's. It's the second of the 3 that's the hardest, 3.5 k's long, steadily uphill the whole way to Grotti.
Which is exactly what it will be if it rains that day.
I see what you did there.
Thanks, yeah. The final sector comes around 25 kilometres later, so they get quite a long bit of respite, don't they? And then it finishes with around 14k to the finish in Rapolano Terme.
Stage 7 is the first of the 2 individual time trials in the race this year. This one is just over 40k's long from Foligno to Perugia. Whilst flat for the most part, the final 6k's are predominantly uphill, and they gain over 250 metres in altitude there, and there's a particularly steep opening part to that climb.
That will be a big one for the GC, won't it?
It will, definitely. And actually, it's the first of 2 big days for the GC riders, because they're then into the high mountains proper on stage 8. 153k's from Spoleto to Prati di Tivo, a climb that was recently used at the Giro d'Abruzzo.
But also one that Pogačar knows well. So he won there in Tirreno a couple of years back. This Giro stage starts on an uncategorised climb, perfect for the non-GC climbers to get into the day's breakaway. And then after a descent, heads up to Forca Capistrello, 16.3 kilometres at 5.6% with a maximum gradient of 12.
From that climb, they're onto the rolling terrain until the foot of the Croce Abbio, which is a third cat climb. And then there's the sting in the tail. The aforementioned Prati di Tivo, 14.6k's long, average gradient 7%.
Stage 9 will mark the end of the first block of racing, and it's the second longest of the race by distance, anyway, if not by duration. 214 relatively flat kilometres from Avezzano to Napoli.
There are a few lumps and bumps in the last 40k's, aren't there? But only one categorised climb, so likely to be a bunch sprint. And nothing against sprinters, but for me that's a really disappointing stage for a Sunday, when you'd think you'd have the biggest potential TV audience.
I do know what you mean. It's got to be said. Still, it does mean that for those of us that might have other things to do, you only have to tune in for like the last half an hour, don't you?
Size a happy man.
Well, yeah. I mean, you get all the best bits in a very short space of time. Yeah, love it. Right, after the first rest day, the race will resume in Pompeii, which last hosted a stage in 1974.
You've been researching as well, Si.
I've been researching as well. It's
Well
not just
done.
you, mate. Yeah.
It's actually the most southerly point, did you know, of this year's race, Pompeii.
Stop with the facts.
It's another flat start to that particular stage, though, but they'll then tackle the Camposuaro around halfway through the stage, before then heading to another summit finish a little bit later on.
Which is at Cusano Mutri. Have I got the pronunciation?
I reckon so.
Yeah, nice, thanks.
Try the next one.
Or Bocca della Selva.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you very much. It's a climb that they went down in 2021.
It is, yes. A climb, or a descent on that occasion, obviously, that Fernando Gaviria crashed out of the breakaway from, wasn't it? On a stage won by Victor Lafay.
Is that memory or research?
No, I did that as research as well.
Okay.
Actually,
yeah, right.
looked it up.
Anyway, that summit finish is 17.9 kilometres. So it's long, isn't it? But at 5.6%, it's not particularly steep, especially by Giro d'Italia standards.
No. Sprinters will have another chance to shine on stage 11, which is another one that's over 200 kilometres long. The first half of the stage is rolling, but the second half is flat, tracking northwards up the Adriatic coast to Francavilla al Mare in the Abruzzo region.
Yeah, and it's that same coastline that they'll be tracking northward for most of stage 12, but unfortunately for the sprinters, there are a couple of deviations inland.
There are indeed.
In total, there are 5 fourth category climbs throughout the day.
But then plenty more, I reckon, that are uncategorised. It's quite a complicated stage to me. The last climb of that day, though, is 1k long at 10% and peaks with 10k's to go. So there is a chance the sprinters could stay up there for the win on that one. But I'd say an equally or greater chance that it could be a breakaway win.
Yeah, be a good one to watch. That
will be a cracking one to watch.
Yeah, and if the sprinters don't win on stage 12, they pretty much certainly will on stage 13, the flattest stage that you are ever likely to see. 179 kilometres from Riccione
Cento.
to Cento.
Yeah.
No, was the first
Oh,
bit.
no, Riccione was good.
Oh, there you
I
go.
thought you were about to say Cento.
No, I wasn't. To Cento, with a maximum altitude of 38 metres above sea level.
Yeah. Also, the other thing is, unfortunately, it's very rare that the wind blows strongly in that particular area, so you almost never get crosswinds. Will be one for the sprinters. Stage 14, though, second of the individual time trials, slightly shorter at 31k's, goes from Castiglione della Stivere to Desenzano del Garda, and it's definitely one for the time trial specialists like Filippo Ganna.
Yeah, obviously, it'll be another important day for the GC as well, as will stage 15, which looks to be one of the most epic Giro stages in years.
Yeah, 220 kilometres, 5,600 metres of climbing.
5,600 metres?
Yeah, that's according to VeloView. It's slightly different on the official Giro website. But according to VeloFacts, that's the most climbing of any Grand Tour stage since riders started uploading their rides to Strava all the way back in 2009. But like I said, there is a discrepancy between...
That was you who uploaded Grand Tour stages to Strava in 2009,
it was
wasn't it?
indeed,
Strava wasn't invented in 2009. You went back.
Yeah, I uploaded.
There we go. Anyway, the stage starts in Manerba del Garda. They take on 2 categorised climbs in the first 65 kilometres and then head along a valley road to the foot of the Mortirolo.
Yeah, which is actually another change of plan since the original one released last autumn. So they'll be doing the southern, slightly less steep side of the Mortirolo, which was last used in 2017. The next climb...
Plenty steep enough.
It's still steep enough, yes, but it
is
could be steeper from a different side. The next climb on the menu that day is the Passo di Foscano, a Category 1 mountain, 14.6 k's at 6.5%.
And that peaks with around 9 kilometres to go, but the climbing still hasn't finished, has it? After a short descent, there is another 4.7 kilometre climb to the finish in Livigno. The average gradient is in double digits on the last 2 kilometres, and it gets to almost 20% in places.
God, what a lovely way to end such a brutal stage, eh? Much better Sunday viewing at the end of the second week of racing.
Yeah, and you can definitely say that they will deserve the rest day they get the day after, especially when you see what's in store when the race resumes on stage 16, which is another epic.
Wow. It's only got 4,100 metres of climbing on that one. Starts uphill, then it's a long descent down to Bormio, a town that will be familiar to many of you because it sits at the foot of the mighty Passo della Stelvio.
That is a hell of a climb, that one, isn't it? It's being used at the race for the first time, actually since 2020, but the first time used in this direction since 2017. However, it comes really quite early in what is a long stage. So unfortunately, we might not see the type of attacks that we're used to seeing on those slopes.
It's a real shame, isn't it? Lots has been said about this, but to have the Stelvio so early does make a bit of a mockery of the Stelvio in some respects.
Really?
Still is the Cima copy of this year's race as the highest point, cresting as it does at 2,758 metres above sea level. After the descent, there's the small matter of about 100 kilometres of flat or steadily downhill roads to the foot of the penultimate climb, the Passo Pinei.
This one is over 23 kilometres long, but with a far friendlier gradient of 4.7%. There is a very brief bit of respite over the top before the climb to the finish, the Monte Panna. That one is 6.5 k's long at 6.1%, but the last 2 k's average just under 12%, which is going to be a tough finish, isn't it? To what is going to be a very, very long day in the saddle, even for the best climbers.
Yeah, I mean, any sprinters left in a race, they're going to face a second successive nightmare actually on stage 17. Pray for the sprinters. So they're climbing straight out of the blocks that day from Selva di Van Gardena, and 9 kilometres later they'll be over 2,000 metres above sea level for the third and final time of this year's Giro.
Strangely, that first climb, the Passo Sella, is second category in status, even though it's 9 k's long at 7.5%.
That is quite crazy, isn't it?
Isn't it really? 4 more categorised climbs then follow, including the Passo Role and the Passo del Broccon,
which they do twice, once from the east and then a second time from the west as they head to the finish line. Last time this mountain featured in the Giro d'Italia was back in 1959.
Oh, there it goes again.
Charlie Gould won at a time of well over 9 hours.
Come on then, Smarty. Which side did they go up?
I've got absolutely no idea. I can tell you the length and gradient of the final climb. That will suffice. 11.9 k's at 6.5%. But there's a 3k section with constant double-digit gradients at some point on it.
For the sprinters who have managed to get through to this point, they will have an opportunity on stage 18, 166 k's to Padova in the Veneto region, with a pan-flat second half to the stage.
And a predominantly downhill first half, so happy days for the bigger riders still in the race. There are more mountains en route to Seppada on the extreme northeast of Italy on stage 19, but they're not that hard. Well, particularly when compared to what has come earlier on in this year's Giro d'Italia.
No, so the final climb that day will be the Cima Seppada, 7.4 kilometres at 5.4%, and reasonably tough towards the top, won't it? They'll still have 6 k's of fairly flat road between the top of that climb and the finish, though.
And so that leads us on to the final mountain stage of the 2024 edition of the Giro d'Italia, and therefore the last opportunity for any changes on the general classification. It features not just one, but 2 ascents of the Monte Grappa. That climb is 18.1 k's long, 8.1%. It's featured a couple of times in the last few editions of the Adriatica Ionica race.
Yeah, the last time it was used at the Giro was in 2017 from the opposite side, but they did use this side in an individual time trial in 2014. Nairo Quintana won that stage and that Giro as well.
He did indeed. So after the second ascent of the climb, it's about 30 k's descending to the finish line in Bassano del Grappa, albeit one of those really annoying little kickers midway down that 30-kilometre descent.
The race will then fly down to Rome, as in literally fly, won't they? Not just ride really fast, for a final stage that has 7 laps around the capital over a distance of 125 kilometres. Normally, you would expect this to be a sprint, but remember the last stage of La Vuelta last year? I'm sort of hoping that might have set a precedent.
Well, yeah, that was a cracking stage, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it?
At the end of the Vuelta last year. Hard to see anything like that happening in Rome. Probably going to be a sprint, but you never know.
You never know. So that is the route. What about the riders? Well, actually, before we get on to that, a bit of housekeeping to do. We have a huge collection of T-shirts and sweatshirts dedicated to this Italian Grand Tour, which you can find over on shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com.
I tell you what, I know only too well just how many different designs of T-shirts there are, Si, because I was asked to model them all recently so that we had some photos for the shop.
You were asked to model them?
Yeah.
Where was everyone else?
Well, no one else was in that day.
Oh,
if I'm completely honest, I was the only person they could choose. Anyway, some cracking designs though, 2 of which Si and I are sporting for this preview show today. As Si said, if you'd like to support us by making a purchase, all you need to do is head over to shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com.
Yeah, I mean, we would really appreciate that.
We would, yeah.
We? As ever, our web team will be covering all the major stories during the race, but there will also be a big build-up this week with a written preview, plenty of interviews, and other Giro-related content on our website. Plus, Alex Payton is heading out there from GCN Tech,
yes.
So keep your eyes on GCN Tech for some content too.
Now, if you're wondering where you're going to be able to watch the Giro d'Italia this year, the answer is on Discovery Plus or Max. So if you haven't already got yourself a subscription, now is probably a decent time to get one, I'd say.
Yeah, if you would like to get weekly updates of the ins and outs of the race though, make sure you subscribe to GCN Racing here, where we will bring you the racing news show each week to concisely wrap things up.
For the time-strapped cycling fan like yourself, Si. Yes. Right, should we get on to the favourites for the race now? No prizes, I don't think. We shouldn't hand out any prize for guessing who we're going to start with. Tadej Pogačar.
Yeah, well, you sport that one, didn't you, in the intro?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Now, he goes into the race as the red-hot favourite, the hottest of hot, basically. No surprises there. We all know how good he is, and without Roglic, Vingegaard, or even Evenepoel here, it is genuinely hard to see how he can lose if he doesn't have a crash or anything else untoward happens.
100%, I would agree. I think anyone who says otherwise is frankly deluded.
Yeah.
He's done 10 days of racing so far in 2024 and won 7 times.
Oh,
I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him win at least 5 stages of this race, including the first one. My one concern is that he burns his team out because he wants to win so much. He's not exactly conservative.
He's not, is he? Do you think that's the only hope the others have got?
Well, I mean, we could also point out that Pogačar now hasn't won a Grand Tour in almost 3 years. 2 years and 9 months to be exact.
Well, there you go. I mean, technically that's probably only because Vingegaard has been so good.
Well, I mean, there is that, but I thought we were trying to give the others some hope at this year's race. Well, but yeah, you are right. His team, I would say, not as strong as it could be. They've got Novak, Majka, Grosjean and Biel for the mountains, Oliveira and Milano for the flat, and Starker Langer for pretty much everything. So no Adam Yates, no Sivakov, Almeida, Ayuso, Del Toro, McNulty, Soler, they're all missing from this particular lineup, and presumably all being saved for the Tour de France, or at least some of them.
Which is a scary thought, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
The second favourite for the race is the man who finished a close second overall last year, Geraint Thomas. So he's 9-1 with the bookies. And as we all know, he is very good at peaking for his goals. Which
means that you can discount pretty much anything you've seen of Geraint Thomas so far this year. He showed nothing last year, did he, before the Giro d'Italia? And he's still almost won, so definitely do not count him out, even if he hasn't won a race now for almost 2 years.
Gosh, that's a stat, isn't it? He will have backing from Foss and Arensman in the mountains, Connor and Ben Swift for rolling terrain, Narvaez potentially for stage wins himself, and Filippo Ganna for everything, basically. Honest question though, can you see Geraint Thomas winning?
I can't, but then this is cycling, isn't it? Anything can happen.
Yeah.
I'll probably regret saying that one. So anyway, Ben O'Connor, let's move on to him. Back at the Giro for the first time since 2020, where his stage win basically kept him in the sport, didn't it? So age 2 with a team that gave him a lifeline when NTT Pro Cycling went under, and he immediately repaid them.
Yeah, they have had a fantastic season already, and O'Connor has been a big part of that, hasn't he? Second in the UAE Tour, 5th at Tirreno, 2nd in the Alps. Do you think maybe he should be second favourite?
I guess you could make an argument for that, yes, if you look at his form this year. But O'Connor's never finished on the podium of a Grand Tour. Geraint has on 4 occasions. But yeah, O'Connor looks fantastic this year. The Paripant brothers are there in support and could well take stage wins of their own, I would say, along the way. Right, 4th favourite then, at least according to the bookmakers. We point out this is not our own list. There are 4 actually, all at 29-1. Cian Uijtdebroeks, Damiano Caruso, Thymen Arensman and Danny Martinez.
Okay, well let's start with Uijtdebroeks then. No Wout van Aert alongside him, unfortunately, but Visma Lease Bike do have Olav Kooij, who we'll talk about later, won't we? And that'll take us some of the pressure off Uijtdebroeks. What do you think would be a good result for him?
Well, I think you probably want to try and improve on the 8th place overall that he had at the Vuelta a España late last year, especially given the, I would say, relatively weak GC field at this Giro. He was 5th at Gran Camino whilst helping Vinegar and 7th at Tirreno amongst some decent company. So I reckon he'd be very, very happy, over the moon with the top 5 here.
Damiano Caruso is a man at the opposite end of his career, isn't he? But he was 4th here last year, so he's clearly still got it for the moment.
Yeah, he's got a strong team as well, hasn't he? Pouls and Stivere are going very well at the Tour of the Alps recently. I'll be interested actually to see if Pouls goes for a stage win or whether he also has a crack at the general classification.
I'd have thought stage wins, given that he only needs a Giro one to complete his collection.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Strong team for Bahrain, though, I think we can agree. Arensman, we've already mentioned, as part of Ineos Grenadiers. He'll primarily be here to work for Thomas, but if anything happens to him, he'll try to improve on his 6th place finish here last year.
And then Danny Martinez, who will spearhead the GC ambitions of Bora Hansgrohe. His results at Grand Tours aren't as good as you might think.
No.
The only time he's been in the top 25 was here at the Giro in 2021, and that was whilst helping Bernal to victory. Yeah,
to be fair, he was 5th that year, wasn't he? So well inside the top 25 on that occasion. Right. But yeah, hard to see him threatening the podium, I would say. Next up, we're going to move on to Romain Bardet. I'm surprised he's behind the others we've already mentioned in terms of odds with the bookmakers, but he is. He's 40-1, or at least he was when I last looked. Yeah,
and he certainly seems to be on an upward trajectory, doesn't he? 5th at Tour of the Alps, 2nd at Liège. That was a solid ride, wasn't it? I have the same questions as you had with Pouls, though. Is he here for GC or stage wins?
I'd imagine he will play it by ear, sort of see where he's at after the first week. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess, won't we? The only other former winner of the race here is Nairo Quintana, but there's good reason for not having already mentioned him. He's already stated publicly that he's not going for the GC this year. He's coming in below his top form, so he is targeting stage wins instead.
And we believe him?
Well, I don't believe he can be right up there on GC, so yes, I do.
Right.
Next up, Jacob Alula's Eddie Dunbar, 7th last year, but so far in 2024, not really had much to shout about. He's been really focused on this race, though, and I would love to see him right up there again this year.
Yeah,
he looked great last year.
Yeah. We've not mentioned anyone from EF yet, have they? They've got Chavez and Carthy, but it's been a while since either of them have been at the pointy end of GC on a 3-week stage race. And that really then is all, that's it, really. Any riders worth shouting about on GC, isn't it? It really is Pogačar's to lose this year.
Well, it totally is, yes. Although I will be interested to see how Juan P. Lopez gets on for Lidl Trek. He won the Tour of the Alps recently as well. And, of course, he was a long time in the pink jersey, wasn't he, a couple of years back in this particular race.
He was, yeah. I will think he'll spend too much energy being the patron of the peloton, and not enough on concentrating on his own riding, personally.
I think you are quite possibly right there, Si. Anyway, shall we move on now to the sprinters, because there are a lot of top quality sprinters in the field this year. Have a listen to this list, Si, if I can rattle them off. We've got Maglia, Kooij, Milan, Groves, Jakobsen, Ewan, Bauhaus, Girmay, Dainese, Vernon, Milano, Gaviria, Van Poppel and Leonardi.
Are you finished?
I think that's about it, yes.
That's some list.
Provisional start list, I should add.
That is some list. Malia, Jakobsen and Ewan are obviously the most decorated, aren't they, when it comes to Grand Tour stage wins. And the Belgian has already made a case for being the fastest in the world this year, hasn't it? Ewan hasn't looked like his former self for a while now, unfortunately. And Jakobsen struggled a bit, hasn't he, since joining DSM? But he did take a win at Turkey.
Yeah, he did,
last week, didn't he? Milan will be motivated, won't he?
He'll be really motivated on a home soil, of course. Already won a stage and a points jersey at this race last year, but I reckon he'll be looking to do that and more this time around.
Yeah.
Kooij's the big one for me, though, I'd say, riding his first Grand Tour, believe it or not. He was the only rider who could challenge Malia at the UAE Tour in February. He took one stage, but Malia had punctured, hadn't he? You'd have thought he'll come away with at least one stage win.
Especially as he's got Laporte to do out, hasn't he? Sam Welsford was originally down for the Giro, but he didn't make the final cut.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. He might be ill. I'm not sure.
Maybe. So Danny Van Poppel will have to step up as their sprinter.
Groves got his win last year in the Giro, one of the tougher finishes, and I think he'll need to focus on similar stages this year, given the calibre of the rest of the sprinters here, but you never know. Ethan Vernon's an interesting prospect. He's taken some decent wins in his career already, but it's never really been against the best sprinters in the world, but this is his first Grand Tour, so a big tryout for him.
Absolutely, yeah. Bauhaus can never be counted out either. He always seems to take a win when you least expect it, doesn't he? Whilst rumour has it that Gaviria has already started his sprint for the Rome stage already.
Very good, Si. Very good.
So, yeah.
I'm a bit surprised, actually, that Arvid de Klein isn't here for Tudor Pro Cycling, but I guess they do have Alberto Dainese. Anyway, in terms of time trialists, well, Filippo Ganna stands tall above the rest in every sense, doesn't he? He'll be the big favourite to win those two stages, you'd have thought. Although, I can't imagine Pogačar will be far behind him if he's behind him at all on that first time trial with the big climb at the end.
I was going to say, yeah, Filippo Ganna is the big favourite alongside Pogačar.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, Ganna should have it more his own way for the flatter time trial of the two, but yeah, with the climb at the end, that could be close.
Well, and Pogačar.
Yeah, full stop.
Yeah, anyway, beyond that, keep your eye out for Florian Lipowitz. He was a bit of a revelation at the Tour of Romandie last week, wasn't he? Finishing third overall, and is riding his first Grand Tour here for Bora Hansgrohe.
He was a real revelation, wasn't he? Ex-biathlete, apparently.
Really?
Alexei Lutsenko is another late addition to the race and the start list. He blows a bit hot and cold, doesn't he? But the most recent blowing was hot. So hopefully he's hit form at the right time. Oh, Lawrence Pithy, probably another person we should mention. Again, provisional start list, but looks like he's doing his debut at a Grand Tour. Tremendous spring he had, didn't he? It wouldn't be a surprise to see him pick up a stage win.
Tremendous. I don't think that word's used often enough, is it?
Well, maybe this is why in the GCN show that came out yesterday, somebody thought I might be your dad.
There are a few riders looking to complete their collection of Grand Tour stages.
Yeah, you mentioned pools earlier, didn't you?
Well, yeah, Mike Woods is another one.
Oh, yeah.
Micah, Jakobsen, and Julian Alaphilippe.
Oh, yes. Well, believe it or not, he's making his debut at this Giro, or at the Giro full stop. Who wouldn't like to see a Julian Alaphilippe masterclass win?
Yeah, I think we'd like to see Julian Alaphilippe full stop, wouldn't we, really? Yeah, but it would be a popular one, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Do you think we should stop rabbiting on now? Wrap things
Probably
up.
covered enough, shouldn't we? Right, is it time to get on with predictions? Actually, let me just say one thing before we get on to predictions.
Go on.
Pozzovivo. That'll do.
Really?
All right, on to predictions then. Should we take Pogačar out of it?
As in, should we see who's going to come second?
Well, it's a bit boring to predict Pogačar for this year's Giro, isn't it?
It is a bit, really, yeah. Go on then. Well, okay, who's coming second?
Do you want to go first or shall I?
You go first, if you like.
I am going to go for Ben O'Connor.
Oh, yeah.
I've just seen he's been so consistent this year already. Clearly been on good form. Clearly got the confidence, which I think he really needs. And everyone's saying their bikes are really good.
Yeah, well, there you go then. You're going to step it up a notch then, or Connor's going to step it up a notch.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go for Geraint Thomas.
Are you?
I think he's got one last go in him before age
Catches up.
Yeah, no, I think he's cool. And also, I mean, the route doesn't look that savage, as we said, which I think is going to suit Geraint, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he likes the harder stuff though, doesn't he?
Massive, long, steep stuff.
Well, maybe not long, steep stuff, but just a hard 3-week Grand Tour. He tends to thrive towards the end. Anyway, yeah, O'Connor for me, and then you've got Geraint Thomas, so we'll wait and see. We have taken Pogačar out of the equation. I'm also going Arensman for Best Young Rider, and Lopez for King of the Mountains, and Milan for the points jersey. Just so you know.
You didn't even tell me to think about those ones.
No. Well, I'd finished my research long before you had, so I thought
I
I'd
was
crack on with
stuck
that.
in 1954 looking at stages of,
Yeah,
whatever.
we were looking at crowdfunding in the late 1800s to get the race off the ground. Right, thanks as ever for watching. As Simon mentioned, we would really appreciate any support you can give us by making a purchase over at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. But all that leaves us to say is bring on Saturday.